welcome to Your Tasty Tidbit. My name is Kale and I am here with Nutrition Services. Today we're going to be making a crunchy treat with your favorite superfood, kale. We're going to make some spicy kale chips today. They're perfect for lounging around the house or taken as a snack on your way to work. So what we'll need first is one bunch of kale. You can get this in your grocery store. It's fairly cheap. You can get it organic and regular. They're both delicious. So what you want to do first is you'll want to break your kale leaves off, and you'll want to break them into about 3-inch square pieces because these are really going to shrink up when you make them. So it's easiest just to rip it off of the stem. You'll want to be sure not to have any stem in there because that's really hard and it gets crunchy and it's kind of fibrous. So you'll want to make sure you don't have that. So you'll want to size about this, about the size of your palm, because it's really going to shrink up into a perfect bite-sized chip size. Okay, once you have your entire bunch of kale cut up into your 3-inch pieces, in a mixing bowl you are going to mix 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And then to that olive oil, you are going to add 1/3 teaspoon of cumin, 1/3 teaspoon of paprika, 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne pepper, and 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder. And you're going to take your whisk and you're going to mix that up, and you really want to be sure to get all those different spices dissolved in here because you want that flavor to be evenly coated on your kale chips. So now once you get that all mixed up, you're just going to throw in your kale chips, and you'll want to be sure to wash these before you cut them up. And then you're going to add your kale to your seasoning, and you're just going to start tossing it. And this is just to get the seasoning all over your kale chips so it's an even flavor. Kale is a really great superfood because it contains 65% of your daily amount of vitamin C, 354% of your vitamin K, and 200% of your vitamin A. So it really is a great source of your vitamins for the day and a bunch of minerals as well. And there are also some health benefits to the spices that we added. These different peppers and spices are really good for improving your digestion, stimulating circulation for blood flow, and it can also clear up those pesky sinuses when you have a stuffy nose. So once we get our kale chips all covered in our seasoning, we are going to line those on our pan. Just a regular baking sheet will work. You'll probably need 2 for 1 bunch of kale. And you'll want to be sure to spray it with your nonstick spray so that they don't stick to the pan. And when you're laying these out, you want to be sure to get them as flat as possible. And this can sometimes be tricky because the edges are so curly and they do stick up, but just try your hardest. They're just going to get crunchy and delicious when you're cooking them in the oven. So when you're trying to do this, be sure to get your kale chips a little bit apart from each other. About 1/4 of an inch away from each other will probably do, because you don't want your chips forming into one giant chip. So you just want to make sure to keep them separate. This is also a fun recipe that you can do with your kids because there are no knives involved. You're just cutting up the kale with your hands, and you're just adding the spices and mixing it with a whisk and just putting it on the baking sheet. You'll just want to make sure that you're the one putting it in the oven and you're the one turning the kale chips once they're halfway cooked. So now that we have all of our kale chips on our baking sheet, we are going to put this in the oven. We are going to put it at 275 degrees for 8 minutes for the first side. Okay, so now that our kale is cooking in the oven for 8 minutes to toast the first side, you can definitely see that our kale chips did shrink up a little bit, but they're still green and they're still a little bit floppy. So what you want to do now is you can take your hand, these are pretty cool to the touch, and just flip your chips over, because you want to be sure to get the crispiness on both sides of the chip. So there's nothing worse than a soggy kale chip. So once we have all those flipped over, you are going to take your pan back into the oven at 275 for an additional 8 minutes to get these all nice and crispy and crunchy. Okay, now that we have finished baking our kale chips for the second round of 8 minutes, you can definitely see that these chips are pretty hard. They're very crispy and they're crunchy and they just break in your hands, which is exactly what you're looking for. The color did change quite a bit. They did go from a bright, vibrant green to a dark green and kind of purple in some spots. So that's exactly what you're looking for. Now once again, let's review the ingredients it took to make these kale chips. 1 bunch of kale, 2 tablespoons of olive oil, 1/3 teaspoon cumin, 1/3 teaspoon paprika, 1/4 teaspoon cayenne pepper, and 1/4 teaspoon garlic powder. So next time you're making kale chips, try and add a little bit of spice to your life and increase your digestion and your blood flow. Just have a great time with your kale chips.